game of basketball. So for me, once I also heard that, like, oh, she really wants me here too, I was like, oh, well, let's get it done then. There's no questions about it.
That wasn't just a player talking trash on the hardwood. That was the sound of a structural foundation shifting underneath the feet of the entire WNBA. For 2 excruciating seasons, we watched the Indiana Fever function like a high-performance sports car with a shattered windshield. We watched the greatest offensive engine the game has ever produced. Caitlin Clark get systematically hunted, hacked, elbowed, and harassed by opposing defenses that knew one simple, ugly truth. The Fever wouldn't hit back. They were the league's designated punching bag. They were the soft underbelly of the professional circuit. But if you think that 90-82 victory against the Golden State Valkyries was just another box score, you missed the murder of an era. The soft Indiana Fever are dead. They were buried last night under the weight of a new, violent, and unapologetic locker room backbone, and the person holding the shovel isn't just a player. She is the most vital, underrated, and terrifying piece of the puzzle. Myisha Hines-Allen. Let's be crystal clear about the geometry of a basketball court. Analytical spreadsheets, front office projections, and transition pacing metrics can quantify almost everything in the modern game. But they fail to account for the unspoken reality of physical deterrence. You cannot build a championship-caliber franchise on offensive rating alone if your locker room lacks a legitimate, fearless enforcer. For the longest time, the rest of the WNBA treated Indianapolis like a buffet line for cheap shots. Opposing teams realized they could violently assault Caitlin Clark, shove her into the stanchions, knock her to the floor during dead ball periods, and poke at her eyes, with zero threat of retaliation. The Fever were labeled soft. They were bullied, but the narrative has been ripped off its hinges. We need to document the exact moment the Fever decided to stop being prey and started becoming the predator. The story of how this seismic shift occurred doesn't actually begin in a locker room. It begins in the quiet, calculated boardrooms of the offseason. Before this season even tipped off, Caitlin Clark, the most scrutinized athlete in the history of the sport, realized a terrifying psychological truth. The best version of her game requires a specific kind of protection. After enduring a 2025 campaign that saw her suffer through 4 soft tissue injuries, dangerous landing zone violations, and enough flagrant fouls to fill a highlight reel, she knew she needed a deterrent. She needed a bodyguard who would be willing to absorb the smoke. And when she navigated the free agency market, she didn't look for another scorer. She looked for a fighter. She identified Myisha Hines-Allen. When Hines-Allen was navigating her free agency, the mainstream media was obsessed with coaching changes and salary cap movements. They weren't paying attention to the quiet, subtle conversations happening behind the scenes. But Hines-Allen was clear. She spoke to the media about her decision to choose Indiana, and she didn't mince words. She mentioned winning, sure. She mentioned the allure of sharing the floor with a generational talent like Clark. But then, she dropped the detail that really mattered. Once I heard that Clark really wanted me there too, I said, well, let's get it done then. There are no questions about it. Think about that. A veteran forward who spent years as a productive, physical starter with the Dallas Wings, a player who could easily demand more minutes and usage elsewhere, accepted a specific, targeted role because the franchise savior requested her. This is the absolute pinnacle of team leadership. Clark saw what was happening to her on the court. She communicated that specific need to the front office, and the franchise delivered exactly what was asked for. They didn't just sign a player. They signed a weapon. Fast forward to the bloodbath against the Golden State Valkyries. The Valkyries came into Indianapolis acting like a junior goon squad, convinced they could bully their way to a win by overwhelming Clark with physicality because they knew they couldn't keep up with her processing speed. They were wrong. Clark, operating in what the media is now calling her darkest, most lethal version, wasn't just hitting shots. She was taunting. She was blowing kisses. She was burying 33-foot logo threes and turning around to talk absolute, unfiltered trash to Tiffany Hayes. She was breaking the will of the opposition, and the Golden State players, humiliated and losing control, took hostile exception. The tension snapped in the final moments of the first half. Clark swatted at the ball in the hands of Janelle Salon, and suddenly, the hardwood felt like a war zone. The benches began to move. Everyone was bracing for an all-out brawl. But before any of the Valkyries could even close the distance on Clark, the frame of the game was shattered. Myisha Hines-Allen sprinted into the epicenter. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look at the referees. She inserted herself squarely between Clark and the charging Golden State defenders. She stood front and center, puffed out her chest, and delivered a message that didn't need a single word to be understood. If you want to touch 22, you have to go through me first. She was acting like a veteran who understood the dynamics of a street fight. She didn't commit a flagrant foul that would cost her team the game. She simply established a boundary that the Valkyries were too intimidated to cross. She stared them down, and for the first time in 2 years, the opposing players backed off. This wasn't just a moment of toughness. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. And it happened again in the second half when Clark got into it with Kayla Thornton. Every single time the temperature rose, Hines-Allen was already standing there, shoulders square, ready for the smoke. She is playing the exact role for Caitlin Clark that Draymond Green played for Stephen Curry. She is the teammate who says, with her body language and her presence, I see what is happening, and if this goes any further, there is going to be a price to pay. And when your generational superstar knows she has that kind of shield behind her, it completely unlocks her psychological freedom. We are seeing it in the stats. Clark is averaging 24 points and 9 assists per game. She's playing with a visible, relentless ferocity because she finally feels safe to operate in the deepest, most competitive parts of her mind. The league has tried to bully her, and all they succeeded in doing was creating a monster who's now hunting them back. But let's be fair. We have to maintain our analytical credibility. Myisha Hines-Allen is not just a hockey-style enforcer on the hardwood. If she were only a brawler, she wouldn't be playing the minutes she is. Her basketball fit is undeniable. Even Stephanie White has publicly praised her basketball IQ, noting how Hines-Allen hunts opportunities for easy buckets and executes the pick and roll with a surgeon-like precision. She isn't just standing there looking tough. She's processing the defense, finding open gaps, and facilitating the ball to shooters like Kelsey Mitchell when the defense collapses on Clark. In that crucial game against the Seattle Storm, when Aaliyah, Boston, was out, Hines-Allen stepped into the starting lineup and played 27 minutes. She scored 8 points, grabbed 6 rebounds, dished 4 assists, and commanded a massive +116 rating. That is not just toughness. That is high-level, functional basketball intelligence. She is a Swiss Army knife who just happens to be willing to fight. An entire opposing roster, if they look at her point guard, the wrong way. The Indiana Fever are officially 4-2. They just took down an undefeated Western Conference juggernaut, and they did it by weaponizing their culture. You have Sophie Cunningham patrolling the perimeter. You have Myisha Hines-Allen anchoring the paint and the mentality. And you have Caitlin Clark operating with the confidence of a player who knows she isn't alone anymore. The entire competitive dynamic of the franchise has been fundamentally altered. The era of the soft fever is dead, buried, and forgotten. Caitlin Clark is now leading a physical, high-octane war machine, and the rest of the WNBA has absolutely no idea how to handle it. They are still trying to play the old game, trying to push and shove their way to a win, not realizing that the ground under them has shifted. The Fever aren't looking for friends anymore. They are looking for respect, and they are taking it by force. The dog has been fully unleashed. The wreckage is piling up, and the rest of the league is starting to realize that the nightmare isn't just Clark's range. It's the army she has behind her. This isn't just basketball. This is the transformation of a franchise, and it is being driven by the one player who was brave enough to stand in the gap when no one else would. Myisha Hines-Allen changed the trajectory of the Indiana Fever, and the results are already being written in the history books of this season. Everyone needs to pay attention because this team is on a warpath, and they are not turning back. The question isn't whether they can make the playoffs anymore. The question is, how many teams are going to be left standing in their wake by the time the dust settles? It's a new day in the WNBA, and the Fever are setting the rules of engagement. If you want to talk to the star, you better be ready to deal with the enforcer. And if you aren't ready for that fight, you might want to stay off the court entirely. The Indiana Fever are no longer playing basketball. They are executing a mission. The soft era is dead, buried, and forgotten. And every team in this league is about to find out exactly what happens when you mistake a predator for prey. We are documenting the fall of the old WNBA order and the rise of this new, lethal Indiana powerhouse, one game at a time. If you want the most unfiltered, high-octane analysis that connects the psychological warfare to the raw numbers, you are in the right place. Smash that subscribe button right now, turn on those notifications, and join the movement before we hit the next level. Drop your most explosive take in the comments below. Is Myisha Hines-Allen the most vital signing in the entire WNBA? And is she the secret MVP behind Clark's dominance? I'm reading every single honest basketball opinion, so let's hear it. Is the Fever's new enforcer era officially here to stay?